Today I'm going to be discussing some concepts from Chapter 4, Sport for Children, Are Organized Programs Worth the Effort? More specifically, I'll be touching on early sport specialization and sport-specific training. So as a strength and conditioning coach, I have seen an increasing desire for sport-specific training within our facilities. This desire is in conjunction with an early push towards early sport specialization and the continued move towards privatization of organized programs. Oftentimes, these organized programs will offer or include or use specialized or sport-specific training as a marketing tool or selling point when drawing in youth athletes to sign up for their organized programs such as travel hockey, club volleyball, or summer baseball. With the emergence of these privatized sporting programs, we have also seen an increasing number of private elite sport training facilities who will either partner with these programs or will administer their own organized sport programs. So these facilities in essence are dedicated to producing highly skilled, physically trained, and specialized athletes who can compete at the highest levels of youth sport. Now the biggest issue with private sport programs is their ever-evolving push towards early sport specialization. And this early sport specialization is often not in the best interest of the athlete, but rather in the best interest of the program managers and the facility owners. So all too often we see kids as early as 5, 6, 7 being pushed to specialize in a particular sport simply at the benefit of the programs that they're enrolled in or the facilities that they train in. So if we look at these elite training facilities, for example, if they can only train an athlete for their off season, leading into their competitive season, then they're not going to have business for half or 3/4 of a year, which is going to be highly detrimental to them producing revenue and keeping their doors open. So a lot of times we see a push towards early sports specialization simply to keep these training facilities and these organized programs running. Now, as a professional in the fitness industry, more specifically as a strength and conditioning coach, I like to ask two questions. The first question being, what is sport-specific training and when should it occur? Now, when we look at sport-specific training, parents, coaches, and athletes, they seem to have this illusion that what we do in the gym is directly correlated to enhancing the athlete's sport performance in a specific, specialized way that corresponds with their sport. Now, this may be true to an extent. However, in most cases, this is not what is occurring, and what we consider sport-specific training is not what the parents, coaches, and athletes consider or are really asking for. So when we look at it, we're not going to be swinging weighted bats for baseball, throwing weighted footballs, or perform a single magic exercise to take the athlete to the next level. Rather, instead of having a set of exercises for baseball, a set of exercises for basketball, and a set of exercises for football, we look to teach the basic fundamental movements and to help the athletes master physical literacy. So all athletes need to learn how to run, how to jump, land, throw, strike, receive, fall, tumble, roll, the basic ABCs of physical literacy. And there's nothing specific about that. That applies to every single sport. You know, a volleyball player has to jump and land. A baseball player needs to run. A football player needs to run, needs to jump, needs to land. These basic skills, they lend themselves to every sport, and there's nothing specific about them. On top of that, we look at when should sport-specific training occur. So in his book, Transfer of Training in Sports, Dr. Anatoly Bondarchuk states that in the theory and methods of physical education, it is during the stage of base preparation, which lasts from 4 to 6 years, that it is believed that with the use of general preparation, it is possible to lay down a full value foundation for future movements, ensure all-around harmonious development of the body, increase the general level of the body's functional capabilities, create a rich fund of differently formed movement skills and abilities, and form beginning basic sports mastery. This also correlates very well with Bloom's research on the 10-year or the 10,000-hour rule. So Bondarchuk is simply stating that we need to master physical literacy and basic movement skills before we can move on to any kind of specific training. Bloom states that it takes 10 years or 10,000 hours to master a skill. So oftentimes when we see these athletes specializing at ages 5, 6, and 7, they simply haven't had In Bondarchuk's words, the 4 to 6 years of the base preparation, and in Bloom's words, they haven't had the opportunity for 10 years or 10,000 hours of performing physical skills and fundamental movements in order to master those. This stance also is strengthened further by the Canadian long-term athlete development model, in which that athletes participating in late specialization sports should not specialize before the age of 12 and should only begin specializing between 12 and 15 if they have acquired and mastered physical literacy before maturation and they have the potential to rise to international stardom within that sport. So again, this is in direct contradiction to some of these early sport specialization programs, and this shows that these early programs, sports specialization programs, are not in the best interest of the athletes themselves. So the reality of the situation is that sport-specific training should not be implemented until athletes have acquired a foundational base of physical literacy and are in a training-to-train stage, which typically occurs between 12 and 16 years of age. Once this age and this stage of training does occur, now sports-specific programs can be implemented, but as I've previously stated, they're not usually what people think. Once physical literacy is mastered, we can now move beyond that. However, when we look again at the sport of baseball, we're not going to swing a weighted bat or throw a weighted ball, but simply we're going to break down a movement such as swinging a baseball bat when a batter is up to hit, and we're going to train its component parts. So for instance, when training a baseball player to swing, we're going to be looking at rotational power, we're going to be looking at triple extension, and we're going to be looking at special strengths such as speed strength in order to have a high velocity when they swing the bat. So this would result in us training rotational power through rotational med ball throws, triple extension through box jumps, and speed strength through traditional dynamic effort work with light weights, trying to move as fast as possible. Now, this will take another step when an athlete becomes slightly more advanced, and we could use an exercise that puts all three components together, such as a rotational landmine press, that is going to train rotational power, triple extension, and speed strength all at once. But again, this is very general in the sense of sport training. We're not using a weighted baseball bat and trying to simulate those movement patterns. So the biggest thing in terms of sport-specific training is that it is our job to make the athletes more athletic, and it is the sport coaches' jobs to make them better at their sport. So whenever we're looking at these organized programs that include an elite training facility that tout their specialized program and all of this stuff, they're often false, or they're often only trying to employ that to generate revenue and to keep their doors open. So in closing, I'd like to leave you with a statement made by Dr. Brian Mann of the University of Miami. And he simply states that when it comes to sport-specific training, we must first understand that most team sport athletes are novice and intermediate lifters at best, and their strength programs should reflect that. Advanced methods are unnecessary until their training age, and previously used methods require it. So oftentimes, when we keep that quote or that saying in mind, we're looking at athletes at an international level, say in the Olympic level, or in professional sports such as the NFL, the NBA, MLB, that will now begin to use sport-specific programs rather than athletes in an early specialization, entering early specialization at a young age.